The organization is all over the place. There are too many projects. There are too many fragmented organizations and institutions within the constellation of the African Union. And there is a need for more focus, more concentration. The second is alignment. There is a need to make sure that we don't go in cross purposes. Like, for instance, the regional economic communities and the African Union have to have a body of commonalities that will allow them to move together and move fast. Because we are in a world that is changing dramatically, and if African is going to have a voice, it has to have a voice that is strategic. And to have a voice that is strategic, you cannot have this disalignment that we are observing right now. The third aspect is that we need also to finance. If you want to finance the institution the way it is financed right now, basically we don't have the levels of independence that would make possible to make choices. Because right now about 70% of the budgets are funded by donors. Africans will have to adjust to what the donors consider their priorities. So if we fix the financing, it's possible also to reinforce the alignment and to reinforce the focus. But then, if you have all of that, you still have to manage, which is the fourth track. And to manage, it's about building an institution that is stronger, with recruitment processes that are transparent, with meritocracy, with accountability, with dimensions that are typical to find in any institution that works well, that are absent in many instances at the AU. So if we have these four tracks moving in a very sophisticated and cohesive manner, we can really make a big change for Africa.
Let's talk about financing, and the big key here is that the AU is going to charge 0.2% levy on eligible imports on the member states, and some of them are paying that, about 20 of them, according to the chairman, the earlier speech. So the question is, are you happy with this kind of reception? How do we bring everyone on board on the 0.2% of imports?
Okay, just to be precise, what the chairperson was saying is that we have more than 20. So in fact, we have about 23 countries that have already started implementation of this measure. And then you have another 10 that have already expressed willingness to start the implementation, but have some technical issues that they are solving. So that makes, 33 countries. That's 2/3. And then the remaining countries don't oppose the measure, but they say it is a decision that depends in their constitutional order of a different decision process than the ones that have already moved. For instance, parliaments have to be consulted. Sometimes there are some constitutional dimensions that will oblige them to, bypass some of the characteristics of the formulation that we have right now proposed to the member states. So they cannot, in sort of official terms, pronounce that they are going to start implementation until the respective bodies actually pronounce themselves. But I don't think there is opposition, honestly. I think there is trepidation here and there in terms of how the implementation is going to take place. And if you look into where this debate started and where we are, the progress has been incredible in the last year.
So you talked about there being so many initiatives, so many projects, but let's focus on the big agenda, which is 2063. How does this reform then speak to Agenda 2063 for the AU, the matters of health, poverty eradication and all that?
Agenda 2063 is a very ambitious agenda. It is so ambitious that the current organization will not be able to respond. Neither will the African states be able to respond to the aspirations of Agenda 2063 if they don't really change and change fast. So, responsibly, it is necessary to start with the continental organization. If you really want to set the example, set the pace, set the direction, and this is an AU agenda, the AU itself has to own it and has to be able to demonstrate that implementation is possible. With the current structure, with the current financing, with the current disalignment, that is not going to happen. That's why we need a reform.
So we will align. How do we make this relevant to the African citizens, ordinary person working or living or farming anywhere in Africa? How then do they know that there is the AU and this is how the AU has an impact in my life?
That is a big problem, because so far, every time that we talk about institutional changes, we kind of focus more on the technicalities, on the bureaucracy, on the politics, but not so much on the citizens that, after all, have to own this too. And that's why the reform team has identified how this could be done. It has very specific proposals, like the establishment of a volunteer corps to mobilize the young people, like the African passport that will allow for everybody to see what free circulation is about, and the communication that would allow for consultations and participation in a lot of the dimensions of the reform. I have to precise that some of the reform items that have been suggested by the reform team and President Kagame are actually not detailed. And this is on purpose, because if you go with a blueprint that is already fabricated in every single corner of the space, and you know all the commas are there, then you are not allowing people to actually participate in shaping it. That's why some of the items are not detailed enough with the purpose in mind of more consultation, more participation.
And so